G'day once again. Today we're up to lecture 7, Jesus in Jerusalem, the final confrontation. So I'd like to do 3 things today. I'd like to finish off the costly values of the kingdom that we're learning about as we journey towards Jerusalem. Remember last time we looked at the importance of following Jesus first in the kingdom, and if we've got money, that can't be something to stop us. We looked about the importance of the great vision of God for one man and one woman to live marriage in faithfulness through life, the importance of being childlike, humble, and so on. Difficult values to live by, but that's the kingdom asking us to live as God wishes us to live. So I'd like to finish that off. The second thing I'd like to do is the entry of Jesus into Jerusalem, and then the entry of Jesus into his temple. And then the third and final thing, I'd like to look at what some scholars call Great Tuesday. That's the Lord's last day in the temple, where he struggles with the Pharisees even more than normal, and where the question rises, who has authority? Where does Jesus have authority from? And so we really ask, and Matthew's really asking, who are the authentic teachers to rebuild God's people, especially after this temple is destroyed in 70 AD. Next week we'll see Jesus actually leaving the temple, and it'll be a very sad moment for him, because he's going to say this: Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you that kill the prophets and stone those who are sent to you, how often have I longed to gather your children as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you refused. So be it. Your house will be left to you desolate. And then we're going to move into the final discourse before the Passion. So that's Great Tuesday, the Tuesday of Holy Week really, that we're going to be looking at thirdly. Back to the first one, the costly values of being part of the kingdom, of being a child of the kingdom. I'd like to look at 2 different things here. The first is the allegory that Matthew has for us of the labourers in the vineyard, from chapter 20 verses 1 to 16. Now this would be a story that's quite familiar to the Jewish people, because labourers used to stand in the marketplace waiting for employment during the mornings and so on. It was normal for them to have a denarius a day. That was a normal wage. And yet, of course, this story becomes confusing and disturbing, and one might even say offensive. Originally, this was a parable directed at those who criticised his acceptance of tax collectors and sinners. But now it's become an allegory with Matthew, and it looks at the last judgment. The focus here is on the first comers and the last comers. The first and the last. We've seen that before. The first will be last, the last will be first. First comers and last comers. We're familiar with the way that the gospel challenges our way of judging and evaluating things. But of course, as we read it, we have some resentment, as the first comers had resentment, that they were paid just as much as the last comers. But of course, what St. Matthew is trying to break open to us in the values of the kingdom is that we don't merit the kingdom. No matter how long we've laboured for God's kingdom, we might have laboured all our lives, and somebody has a conversion experience and starts to work for God late in life. Doesn't matter. In fact, we're called to be grateful that God is so generous and that the kingdom surprises us at any stage in life's journey. None of us merit the kingdom by labouring. It always comes as a grace and as a gift. That's one of the challenging values of the kingdom that Jesus is asking us to think about. We don't compare ourselves with others. What we do, what others do. We're all just part of the kingdom, and we accept grace as God gives us to us. The second thing I'd like to look at under these costly values or challenging values of being a member of the kingdom comes from the story of the mother of the two sons of Zebedee, John and James. Now this is an episode which helps us to think about basically our attitude in the community should be one of serving rather than having special privileges. Most of us seek a little bit of recognition. You know how we've all got to say thank you to various groups after we do things and so on. That's important to recognise and to say thanks. But if we're a member of the kingdom, we don't get hurt if we're overlooked. Because we're doing it not for recognition, we're doing it to serve the community and ultimately that the kingdom of God advances. Matthew in this scene focuses a little bit on the cup, because when the mother of the two sons says, "Can my two fabulous sons sit beside you in the kingdom?" he says, "Well, look, that's not me to give you that answer there. But I ask, can you guys drink of the cup that I'm going to drink?" Of course they say, "Of course we can." Now the cup in the Old Testament often means a cup of suffering. My cup of suffering is full. It can mean even death. Drinking the cup of suffering can mean I'm going to die. Now St. Matthew uses this in this Hebrew sense, the cup of suffering, again when Jesus is in the Garden of Gethsemane. "If it's possible, Father, let this cup pass from me. If this cup cannot pass by without my drinking it, your will be done." That's why at Mass, of course, the cup of wine that becomes the Lord's blood, reminds us of his suffering and death, and perhaps the suffering and death of the suffering of the whole world. As well as, of course, there's a tinge of joy in drinking wine at celebrations and so on. I guess, too, what the Lord is saying to us, Matthew is saying to us, and the Lord, is that even martyrdom, even if you lay down your life for me, even if you drink this cup of death, it doesn't mean you've got a special place in the kingdom, because that's not what the values are about. So Jesus moves from that, or Matthew rather moves from that, into a talk about service in the church. And the way we live together in the church isn't where those in authority lord it over others, stress their authority, their privilege and so on. But authority in the church is to be marked by service. The Greek word is diakonia, deacon. A deacon is one who serves, diakonia. If we translate that into a Latin word, it's ministerium, ministry. A minister is one who serves.